October 14, 1943, 27,000 feet above Schweinfurt, Germany. The cockpit of Oberleutnant Franz Stiegler's Messerschmitt, Bf 109 G6 shudders as he banks hard to starboard. The Bavarian countryside tilting beneath him like a painted canvas. His breath comes in short bursts through the rubber oxygen mask, each exhalation fogging briefly against the inside of his goggles before the sub-zero air clears it away. The temperature outside hovers at minus 40 degrees Celsius. Inside his leather flight suit, sweat trickles down his spine despite the cold. Achtung, 4 Mods at 2 Uhr hoch. The warning crackles through his headset. 4 engines, 2 o'clock high. Stiegler cranes his neck, scanning the brilliant blue sky, and then he sees them. His jaw tightens. Boeing B-17 flying fortresses, hundreds of them. Their silver fuselages catching the midday sun like a swarm of metallic locusts stretching across the sky from horizon to horizon. The contrails streaming behind each aircraft create geometric patterns in the thin atmosphere. Long white scars that mark the violation of German airspace. He counts quickly, his practiced eye tallying the formations. 60, 80. Over 100 aircraft in this wave alone, and somewhere ahead, more formations penetrate deeper into the Reich. The Americans call them flying fortresses, and from this angle, Stiegler understands why. Each bomber bristles with 50 caliber machine guns, 13 per aircraft he knows after studying the intelligence reports. He can see the ball turret gunner suspended beneath one B-17, rotating his transparent sphere to track potential threats. The top turret gunners scan methodically, their twin guns swiveling. Waist gunners peer from their positions, 50 calibers ready. These machines don't fly alone or defenseless. They fly in tight combat box formations, each bomber covering another's blind spots, creating interlocking fields of fire that can shred a fighter that ventures too close. Gruppe formieren. Prepare to attack from 12 o'clock high. Remember, head-on passes only. The voice of Major Heinz Baer, their Staffel commander, cuts through the radio chatter. Stiegler knows the doctrine. Hit them from the front where they're most vulnerable, where only the nose gunner and the top turret can engage. Close to 300 meters, fire your cannon and machine guns in a concentrated burst, then dive beneath before their gunners can track you properly. Never ever tail chase a B-17. That's where their defensive fire concentrates. That's where pilots die. Stiegler's Messerschmitt climbs, the Daimler-Benz DB605 engine howling as he advances the throttle. Around him, 11 other Bf-109s and FW-190s of the Ku JG-26 form up, their noses pointing upward toward the bomber stream. His hands are steady on the stick and throttle, muscle memory from 2 years of combat overriding the flutter of adrenaline in his chest. This is his 47th mission. He's shot down 12 enemy aircraft, 7 fighters, 5 bombers. Today, he tells himself, will add to that tally. The American formation maintains its course unwavering, disciplined. Their target is obvious to every German pilot in the sky today. Schweinfurt, where the ball-bearing factories produce components essential to every piece of German machinery, from tanks to aircraft. Intelligence reports suggested this raid was coming. The Luftwaffe has concentrated every available fighter within range. Over 300 German fighters are airborne today, the largest defensive effort mounted in months. The Americans must know they're flying into a meat grinder, yet still they come. Stiegler rolls his Messerschmitt inverted and pulls the stick back, arcing up and over in a climbing turn that brings him into position 3,000 feet above the bomber formation. His wingman, Unteroffizier Klaus Weber, stays glued to his right wing, a 20-year-old kid from Hamburg on his 8th mission. Good instincts, that one. Quick reflexes. Might actually survive this war if he stays smart. Remember, Weber, shoot for the cockpit and engines. One pass, then brake hard left and dive. Don't linger in their kill zone. Stiegler's voice is calm, almost conversational. He learned long ago that panic is contagious over the radio. Verstanden, Herr Oberleutnant. Weber's voice is tight, higher pitched than usual. Fear. Natural. Healthy, even. The ones who feel no fear are the ones who die stupidly. The bomber stream grows larger in Stiegler's gun sight, individual aircraft resolving from the mass. He can see details now, the mission markings on the fuselages, the squadron letters, the names painted near nose art. One fortress has a pin-up girl painted on its nose. Another shows a grinning devil riding a bomb. Americans and their strange sense of humor in the face of death. Stiegler picks his target, a B-17 flying in the lead element of the high squadron. Its aluminum skin is pristine, unmarked by flak or previous battle damage. Perhaps a new aircraft. Perhaps a fresh crew. Angriff. Attack now. Bear's command snaps across the frequency. Stiegler pushes the stick forward. The Messerschmitt's nose drops. The horizon disappearing above his canopy as he enters a steep dive, building speed. The airframe beginning to vibrate as the airspeed indicator needle climbs past 650 kilometers per hour. The bomber grows in his windscreen with terrifying speed. He can see the pilots in the cockpit now. Two figures behind the plexiglass nose, and yes, the nose gunner is already tracking him, the twin 50 calibers swinging to bear. 300 meters. The optimal firing range. Stiegler's thumb hovers over the firing button on his control stick. The pipper in his Revi gun sight crosses the bomber's cockpit. He presses the button. The Messerschmitt shudders as its weapons fire in unison. 2 30mm machine guns in the cowling and a 20mm cannon firing through the propeller hub. Tracers arc across the closing distance, bright against the sky. Stiegler sees his cannon shells impact. Bright flashes against the bomber's nose and cockpit area. Pieces of plexiglass and metal tear away, spiraling backward in the slipstream. The bomber's nose gunner stops firing. Whether hit or dead, Stiegler can't tell. Then he's past, the fortress rushing overhead so close he can see rivets on its belly, can see the ball turret rotating frantically to track him. He slams the stick left and forward, rolling inverted and pulling down, diving away, accelerating toward the safety of the altitudes below where the bomber's guns can't follow. Tracer fire from multiple fortresses streams past his canopy, red and white lines seeking his aircraft, but he's already gone, diving through 8,000 feet in seconds. His heart hammers. He pulls back on the stick, blood draining toward his legs as the G-forces mount, his vision narrowing at the edges. The Messerschmitt bottoms out of the dive at 15,000 feet. Stiegler gasps for breath, rolling upright, scanning the sky for threats and for Weber. "I'm with you, Herr Oberleutnant." Weber's voice excited now, the fear burned away by action. "I hit one of them. Smoke from the number 3 engine." "Good shooting. Now we climb and do it again." Stiegler advances his throttle, pulling the stick back, trading speed for altitude. The bomber stream continues its inexorable advance toward Schweinfurt, though now he can see several fortresses trailing smoke, limping, falling behind the formations. Other German fighters swarm around the bombers like angry hornets. The sky is a madhouse of diving fighters, tracers, smoke trails, and the slow-motion ballet of the bombers maintaining formation despite the chaos. A B-17 explodes off to Stiegler's left, a direct hit on a fuel tanker bomb bay. One moment it's there, a gleaming silver fortress. The next, it's an expanding fireball of orange and black. Fragments tumbling earthward, trailing smoke. Stiegler counts. 3 parachutes. Maybe 4. The crew was 10 men. He forces himself not to think about the rest. The radio is chaos now. Shouted warnings, kill claims, calls for help. "I'm hit. I'm hit. On your tail, Hans. Break right." There's another formation at 25,000. "Achtung, Mustangs at 3 o'clock. No, wait, there are no Mustangs today. The American fighters, P-47 Thunderbolts, turned back at the limit of their range an hour ago. These bombers penetrate deep into Germany without fighter escort, relying solely on their formations and defensive armament. Madness. Brave madness. But madness nonetheless. Stiegler climbs back to altitude, his practiced eye already selecting his next target. A fortress in the middle of the formation, its number 2 engine already streaming white smoke, probably hit by another fighter's attack. The bomber is vulnerable, unable to maintain full power, gradually falling back from the protective formation. Like a wildebeest separated from the herd, Stiegler thinks. He angles toward it, Weber still on his wing. This time he approaches from 5 o'clock high, slightly behind and above, where the tail gunner and ball turret gunner will have the best shot at him, but where he can fire into the bomber's more vulnerable tail section and possibly knock out those defensive positions. It's riskier than a head-on pass, but damaged bombers sometimes make it home even with shattered cockpits. You need to set them on fire or knock out enough engines that they can't maintain altitude. The tail gunner sees him coming. Twin 50 calibers flash, and Stiegler jinxes his fighter, pulling slight corrections on the stick, spoiling the gunner's aim. Tracers stream past his canopy, too close. One round pings off something on his aircraft's tail. Then he's in range, firing, his cannon shells walking up the bomber's fuselage, tearing into the horizontal stabilizer, shattering the tail turret. The tail gunner stops firing. Stiegler doesn't press the attack. The moment his ammunition runs out, he pulls hard left, breaking away. But as he does, he sees something that makes his blood run cold. Behind this damaged fortress, behind the entire formation he's been attacking, another wave of B-17s approaches, and behind them another. The sky is full of them, silver upon silver, a seemingly endless stream of American bombers. How many are there? 200? 300? He levels his Messerschmitt and stares. In 2 years of combat on the Russian front and now here in the West, he's never seen anything like this. The Americans are sending everything they have. October 14th, 1943, 1700 hours. Luftwaffe base, Schiphol, Netherlands. Stigler's Messerschmitt touches down on the grass runway as the sun begins its descent toward the western horizon. The tailwheel settles and he throttles back, letting the aircraft roll, his body sagging with exhaustion. 3 sorties today, 3 times climbing to altitude, attacking the bomber formations, dodging their defensive fire, and landing to rearm and refuel. His hands tremble slightly on the throttle. Not fear, just the aftermath of adrenaline, of sustained tension, of pulling high-G maneuvers for hours while breathing oxygen-thin air. The ground crew swarms his aircraft before he's even fully stopped. They're counting the bullet holes. Stigler pops the canopy, and the relatively warm air of ground level washes over him, thick and rich compared to the thin atmosphere at combat altitude. His crew chief, Obergefreiter Miller, a 45-year-old veteran who'd maintained aircraft since the Condor Legion in Spain, stands on the wing root, his weathered face grim. 17 holes, Herr Oberleutnant. 2 in the tail section, the rest scattered. Nothing critical, but we'll need 3 hours to patch them properly. Miller's eyes scan the aircraft with the practiced gaze of someone who knows every rivet, every panel. You were lucky today. Luck. Stigler unbuckles his harness with stiff fingers and levers himself out of the cramped cockpit. His legs nearly buckle when his boots hit the wing root. 6 hours of flying, most of it in combat. His body feels like he's been beaten with clubs. How many did we lose? Miller's face darkens. From our Staffel? 3 so far. Lieutenant Hoffman is confirmed. Saw his shoot, so he's probably a prisoner. Unteroffizier Schneider and Feldwebel Koch. No shoots reported. Stigler closes his eyes briefly. 2 dead, 1 captured. From a Staffel of 16 aircraft that began the day. And they were one of the lucky units. Some Jagerschwaders have been nearly wiped out. The radio traffic during the battle told the story of desperate actions. Skilled pilots dying and always, more bombers. He climbs down from the wing and accepts the cigarette Miller offers, though his hands shake slightly as he lights it. The tobacco tastes harsh and wonderful. Around the airfield, other Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs are landing, taxiing, being swarmed by ground crews. Some aircraft are so shot up they're barely flyable. Wings shredded by .50 caliber fire, tail sections half shot away, canopies shattered. One P-190 taxis past with its propeller blades bent backward, having made a gear-up belly landing on a nearby field and somehow been recovered. We hit them hard today, Miller says, watching Stigler's expression. I've heard reports of 60 bombers shot down, maybe more. 60. Stigler takes a long drag on the cigarette, letting the number settle in his mind. 60 American bombers, 600 American airmen if the crews were full. The 8th Air Force will feel that. It's more than they've lost in any single mission. Surely this will make them reconsider these deep penetration raids without fighter escort. Oberleutnant Stigler, a voice calls across the hardstand. Stigler turns to see Major Bear striding toward him, still in his flight gear, his face flushed with excitement. Behind him, other pilots are gathering, those who've returned, who've survived. Weber is there, his young face animated as he gestures, probably recounting his first bomber kill. Others look shell-shocked, their eyes distant. A tremendous victory, Bear's voice carries across the gathering crowd of pilots and ground crew. Initial reports indicate we destroyed over 60 American bombers. 60, perhaps as many as 70 or 80, the highest loss rate they've ever suffered. And look at this. He holds up a message flimsy, the thin paper fluttering in the evening breeze. Reichsmarschall Göring himself sends his congratulations to all units involved. He says the Luftwaffe has proven that daylight strategic bombing without fighter escort is impossible. The Americans cannot sustain such losses. A ragged cheer goes up from the gathered men, but Stigler notices it's muted, tired. These pilots have seen too much today. They've fought brilliantly and bled heavily for this victory. 28 German fighters lost, according to the initial reports Stigler has heard. 28 pilots dead or missing, against 60 American bombers. The mathematics of it gnaw at Stigler's mind as Baer continues speaking, as wine is produced to celebrate, as the pilots begin to relax, the tension of combat bleeding away. 60 bombers destroyed, but over 200 bombers had attacked. Most of the American force made it through to Schweinfurt, dropped their bombs and fought their way back out. And the ball-bearing factories, Stigler has heard rumors they were badly hit. More troubling is a question he can't shake. How long can the Luftwaffe sustain these defensive battles? Stigler is one of the experienced ones, one of the survivors, but experienced pilots like him are a dwindling resource. Every battle bleeds away irreplaceable expertise. The Americans, on the other hand. Stigler thinks of those endless formations, the disciplined flying, the sheer number of aircraft. How many do they have? How many can they afford to lose? He doesn't voice these thoughts. Around him, his fellow pilots drink and talk, analyzing the day's combats, claiming kills, mourning the lost. It's what you do after a mission like this. You drink, you talk, you try not to think about doing it again tomorrow, but tomorrow comes regardless of what you think about it. October 15th, 1943. Aero 9:30 hours, 8th Air Force Headquarters, High Wycombe, England. Major General Frederick Anderson stares at the casualty reports spread across his desk, and the numbers blur together into a nightmare of arithmetic. 60 B-17s lost out of 291 dispatched. That's over 20% of the attacking force. 600 men dead, missing, or captured. Another 17 B-17s damaged beyond economical repair, written off as they limped back to England on failing engines and shredded airframes. The photo reconnaissance aircraft returned this morning with images of Schweinfurt. The ball-bearing factories are burning. Secondary explosions continued through the night. Bomb damage assessment teams estimate 67% of the target complex sustained significant damage. By any tactical measure, the mission achieved its objective. But the cost? Anderson lights another cigarette from the butt of his previous one. He hasn't slept. None of the senior staff have. All night they've been receiving reports as bombers straggled back to England, as aircraft ditched in the Channel, as crews bailed out over the North Sea. Search and rescue operations are still underway. Some crews might still be picked up, but most of those 60 aircraft went down over Germany or occupied Europe. Those men are gone. A knock at the door. Come. Lieutenant Colonel Curtis LeMay enters, his face haggard but composed. LeMay commanded one of the bomb groups on the Schweinfurt raid, the 305th, which lost 4 B-17s. He's still wearing his flight jacket, still carrying the weight of having sent men to their deaths. Sir. LeMay's voice is flat, emotionless, but Anderson knows the man well enough to see the strain beneath the professional mask. The after-action reports are being compiled. Initial crew debriefs indicate the German fighter opposition was the heaviest we've encountered. Estimated 300 fighters engaged throughout the mission profile. Attacks came in waves, primarily head-on passes with cannon-armed fighters. The lack of fighter escort for the target approach and egress. He doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't need to. I know. Anderson stubs out his cigarette. We all know. The P-47s don't have the range. We're working on drop tanks, but until then, he gestures at the casualty reports. This is what we pay. LeMay moves to the window, looking out at the English countryside, green and peaceful in the morning light. Somewhere out there, on dozens of airfields scattered across eastern England, ground crews are repairing damaged B-17s. Armorers are loading bombs. Crews are being debriefed. And in the barracks, empty bunks stare at survivors. The men will go back up, LeMay says quietly. They're shaken, but they'll fly. Americans don't quit. The question, Anderson replies, is whether Washington will let us continue these deep penetration missions. Congress is going to see these loss rates. The press is going to report this. There will be questions about whether strategic bombing without fighter escort is sustainable. LeMay turns from the window. Is it, sir? Sustainable? Anderson is silent for a long moment. Then, we're producing B-17s faster than they can shoot them down. We're training crews faster than they can kill them. The mathematics are brutal, but they favor us eventually. How many men die while we wait for eventually? LeMay's question hangs in the air. Anderson has no answer. Instead, he pulls a different folder from his desk drawer, one marked Production Reports. He opens it, scanning the numbers that both terrify and reassure him. Current B-17 production rate is averaging 37 aircraft per day across all manufacturers. That's over 1,000 aircraft per month. We lost 60 yesterday. We'll replace them in less than 2 days. The Germans shot down 60 bombers and celebrated a great victory. We'll make up that loss before the end of the week. LeMay's expression doesn't change, but something flickers in his eyes. Understanding, horror, grim satisfaction, perhaps all three. And the crews? He asks. Training Command is graduating new crews every week, enough to replace losses and expand the force. Anderson closes the folder. I'm not saying losses don't matter. Every man who doesn't come back is a tragedy. But Curtis, we're going to win this war through industrial might. We're going to bury the Luftwaffe under an avalanche of bombers they cannot possibly stop. 60 aircraft lost is terrible. It's also something we can absorb. The question is, can they absorb the losses they took shooting down those 60? Can they sustain fighter losses at this rate? Because I don't think they can. A longer silence. Outside, Anderson can hear a B-17 taking off from a nearby airfield. The deep rumble of 4 Wright Cyclone engines. The sound of American power projecting across the Atlantic. So we go back, LeMay says. It's not a question. We go back. Give the crew 72 hours to rest. Repair the damaged birds. Then we hit them again. Different target, but same operational profile. And we keep hitting them until they break or until someone invents a fighter that can escort us all the way to Berlin and back. LeMay nods slowly. He understands the calculus, even if he doesn't like it. I'll need replacements for the 305th, crews and aircraft. You'll have them by tomorrow afternoon. Anderson pulls another folder, this one containing crew rosters. 12 replacement crews are being assigned to your group. Fresh from training, but they're qualified. The aircraft are already en route from the modification depot. LeMay takes the folder, flips through it briefly, then tucks it under his arm. Sir, the Germans are going to think they won yesterday. They're going to think we can't sustain these losses that will stop the deep penetration missions. Let them think that. Anderson replies. Let them celebrate. Then we show them what American industrial production really means. We show them that you can't win a war of attrition against the United States, not when we can build aircraft faster than they can shoot them down. October 17th, 1943, 08:15 hours. Luftwaffe base Schiphol, Netherlands. The morning air is cold and damp, typical for the Netherlands in autumn. Stiegler hunches in his flight jacket, a mug of ersatz coffee. Barely coffee at all, more like roasted grain with delusions of adequacy, warming his hands. Around him, other pilots gather for the morning briefing. The mood is lighter than it was 2 days ago. Word has filtered through official and unofficial channels that the Schweinfurt raid cost the Americans dearly. 60-plus bombers destroyed, the most successful defensive battle of the war. Surely the Americans will need weeks to recover from such a blow, to regroup, to rethink their strategy. Stiegler isn't so sure, but he keeps his doubts to himself. Major Bear enters the briefing hut, and the assembled pilots snap to attention. At ease, gentlemen. Be seated. Bear moves to the map table at the front of the room, but something in his posture makes Stiegler's gut tighten. The Major's face is drawn, his eyes showing the strain of too little sleep and too much responsibility. I'll be direct. Bear begins without preamble. Radar installations along the coast have detected a large formation of American bombers crossing into German airspace approximately 40 minutes ago. Estimated strength, over 200 aircraft, possibly more. Course suggests they're heading for targets in northern Germany. All Jagdgeschwaders in range are being scrambled. The briefing hut erupts in noise, shocked exclamations, disbelieving curses. Weber, sitting next to Stiegler, looks like he's been slapped. 2 days, he whispers. It's only been 2 days since Schweinfurt. How can they— silence! Bear's command cuts through the commotion. I know what you're thinking because I'm thinking it too. We destroyed 60 of their bombers 2 days ago. They should be reeling. They should need weeks to replace those losses, to recover their strength. But here they are coming back with another massive raid. This tells us something important about the enemy we're fighting. It tells us they have resources we haven't fully appreciated. Stiegler sets down his coffee mug, suddenly not wanting it anymore. His hands are steady, but his mind races. 2 days, 60 bombers destroyed, and already they're back with another 200-plane raid. The mathematics of it are staggering. Either the Americans have so many bombers that losing 60 barely dents their strength, or they're replacing losses with a speed that defies belief, or both. The mission is straightforward. Bear continues. We intercept the bomber formation, break up their formation if possible, destroy as many as we can. Same tactics as Schweinfurt. Head-on passes, attack the stragglers, focus on setting them on fire or knocking out engines. The bombers will be without fighter escort once they penetrate beyond the range of their thunderbolts, so we'll have a window of opportunity. Bear pauses, meeting the eyes of his pilots. I won't lie to you. This will be hard. We took losses at Schweinfurt. Good men, experienced pilots. We'll take losses today. But this is what we trained for. This is what we do. The Reich depends on us. Our families depend on us. Every bomber we shoot down is one less bomber that reaches our cities, our factories, our homes. The briefing concludes with the technical details. Altitude assignments, radio frequencies, rendezvous points. Stigler absorbs it all with the automatic precision of a veteran, but part of his mind remains stuck on one fact. 2 days. They're back after 2 days. October 17th, 1943, 10:45 hours, 26,000 feet above Bremen, Germany. The sun glints off plexiglass and polished aluminum as Stigler's Messerschmitt climbs toward the bomber stream. He can see them now. Distant specks resolving into their familiar shape. B-17s arranged in their combat boxes, droning eastward with the inexorability of a glacier. His radio crackles with reports from other intercepting units. The Americans are heading for industrial targets around Bremen and Emden, ship construction facilities, U-boat yards, aircraft factories. Stigler scans the formation as he maneuvers into attack position, and something catches his attention. Many of these bombers look new. Fresh paint, no combat damage, pristine aluminum skin. He's flown enough missions to recognize the difference between veteran aircraft, patched, repainted, marked by previous battles, and newly delivered machines. And the formation is thick with new birds. New bombers, he mutters over the radio to Weber. Look at them. Half this formation is brand new aircraft. Where are they getting them all? Weber's voice carries a note of disbelief. Stigler doesn't answer because he has no answer that makes sense. Instead, he focuses on his attack run, selecting a target, rolling inverted, pulling through into a diving attack that brings him screaming toward the bombers at closing speeds, exceeding 1,000 kilometers per hour. The familiar ballet of combat begins. Fire, breakaway, climb, attack again. The sky fills with tracer fire, smoke trails, burning aircraft, and parachutes blossoming like deadly flowers. He shoots down a B-17 on his third pass, engine smoking, control surfaces shot away, the fortress entering a death spiral with 3 parachutes deploying before it disappears into the clouds below. His ammunition is depleted after that. Standard procedure is to return to base, rearm, and return to the fight. But as he turns westward, heading back to Schiphol, Stigler sees something that makes him maintain his heading despite being defenseless. The bomber formation continues eastward, and now he's ahead of it, watching from a position where he can observe without being immediately threatened. He counts over 200 bombers, and behind the main formation another group approaches, a second wave. Perhaps 50 more aircraft, 250 bombers. 2 days after losing 60, the implications crash over Stigler like a wave. America isn't just replacing losses. They're expanding. The force attacking today is larger than the force that attacked Schweinfurt, significantly larger, which means somewhere across the Atlantic in factories Stigler can barely imagine. Americans are building bombers faster than the Luftwaffe can shoot them down. Much faster. He recalls the intelligence briefings, the ones that seemed so absurd he'd dismissed them as exaggerations or Allied disinformation. Reports claimed American factories were producing heavy bombers at rates of dozens per day. Boeing alone supposedly had multiple production lines running simultaneously. Combined with other manufacturers, the report suggested production rates exceeding 1,000 bombers per month. Stigler had laughed at those numbers. Impossible, he'd thought. No nation could produce aircraft at such rates. The Germans were proud of producing 600 fighters per month, and that required diverting resources from every other sector of the economy. But now, watching this armada of bombers continue eastward, the sunlight glinting off row after row of pristine aluminum wings, Stigler feels the laughter dying in his throat. What if the intelligence reports weren't exaggerations? What if they were accurate? What if America really could produce bombers by the thousand? October 18th, 1943, 0600 hours. Luftwaffe base Schiphol, Netherlands. Stiegler hasn't slept well. His dreams were full of bombers, endless streams of them, filling the sky from horizon to horizon, more appearing every time he shot one down. He sits in the officer's mess, pushing runny eggs around his plate without appetite, when Miller finds him. Herr Oberleutnant, you should see this. The crew chief's face is grim. We've been tallying the results from yesterday's mission. Stiegler follows Muller outside to where a chalkboard has been set up, covered with numbers and unit designations. Other pilots are gathering, coffee mugs in hand, studying the board with expressions ranging from satisfaction to concern. Preliminary reports indicate we destroyed 41 American bombers yesterday, Muller explains, running his finger down the list of claims. Another 30+ damaged. By any measure, a successful defensive operation. But, Stiegler prompts because he can hear the unspoken word hanging in the air. But, Miller continues, we lost 32 fighters. Killed or missing. That's our third major engagement in a week, Herr Oberleutnant. Schweinfurt, then yesterday's raid, and the week before that the Americans hit Münster. We're bleeding experienced pilots. Stiegler studies the numbers, his engineer's mind doing calculations he wishes it wouldn't. At Schweinfurt, they'd shot down 60 bombers while losing 28 fighters, a ratio of roughly 2-to-1. Yesterday, 41 bombers down at a cost of 32 fighters, barely better than 1-to-1. The Americans are learning, adjusting their tactics, tightening their formations, and the Luftwaffe's loss rate is climbing. Worse, those ratios only matter if the enemy can't replace their losses. If America really is producing bombers at the rates intelligence suggests, then even a 2-to-1 kill ratio favors them. They lose 2, they build 10, they lose 60 at Schweinfurt, and 2 days later they're back with an even larger force. There's something else, Miller says quietly, glancing around to ensure no one else is listening. Word from higher headquarters. The ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt we hit so hard, they're estimating the Germans will have them back in production within 6 weeks. The Americans dropped a lot of bombs, started a lot of fires, but the actual structural damage was less than hoped. And meanwhile, the Americans are back in the sky bombing other targets, Stiegler finishes. He stares at the chalkboard, at the neat rows of numbers that tell a story his mind doesn't want to accept. Miller, what are the replacement rates for our fighters? When we lose an aircraft, how long before we get a new one? The crew chief's face darkens. Depends on the aircraft type and damage. For a total loss, we might wait 2 weeks, maybe a month for a replacement. Sometimes longer. Production can't keep up with losses, so units are constantly below authorized strength. Your Staffel is supposed to have 16 aircraft. Right now you have 12 operational birds. Stiegler nods slowly. He'd known this, but hearing it stated so bluntly makes it real. The Luftwaffe is running on a treadmill, losing aircraft faster than they can be replaced, burning through experienced pilots who represent years of training. And across the English Channel, the Americans keep coming, keep sending more bombers, and apparently keep replacing their losses faster than Germany can inflict them. It's a war of mathematics, and Germany is losing the equation. A runner appears breathless from sprinting across the airfield. Herr Oberleutnant Stiegler, Major Bear wants all pilots in the briefing hut immediately. The tone in the runner's voice makes Stiegler's stomach sink. He knows that urgency. It means one thing. They're coming back. Again. October 18th, 1943, 11:30 hours. 25,000 feet above Düren, Germany. For the third time in 5 days, Stiegler is in combat against American bombers. This time it's a smaller raid. Only 150 B-17s, but only is a relative term when you're facing off against that many heavy bombers, each one bristling with guns and carrying enough explosives to level a city block. The engagement is brutal and chaotic. Stiegler makes 4 attack passes, expending all his ammunition, and sees strikes on 2 bombers, though he can't confirm whether his fire caused fatal damage. The formations are tighter than ever. The defensive fire more coordinated. The Americans are learning quickly. On his final pass, tracer fire from a B-17's top turret stitches across his Messerschmitt's right wing. He feels the impacts, hears metal tearing, sees fabric and metal strip away from the wing's leading edge. Warning lights flash on his instrument panel. Hydraulic pressure dropping, fuel leak in the right tank. He breaks off the attack, diving away, his hands moving with practiced efficiency to assess the damage. The Messerschmitt handles sluggishly, pulling to the right. Stiegler compensates with left aileron and rudder trim, coaxing the wounded fighter westward toward home. Around him, the battle continues. Fighters swirling around the bomber formation like angry insects, smoke trails marking the trajectories of dying aircraft. He counts at least 5 B-17s going down, trailing fire and debris. But the formation maintains cohesion, continues its bombing run, and will fight its way back to England minus a handful of bombers. A handful. That word gnaws at him as he nurses his damaged Messerschmitt back to Schiphol. 5 bombers destroyed. He's fairly certain of that count from what he observed. Maybe 7 or 8 if he's generous with his estimates. Out of 150, the Americans will lose less than 5% of their attacking force. They can sustain that rate indefinitely. Can Germany? Landing with damaged hydraulics is a delicate business, but Stiegler has done it before. He brings the Messerschmitt in hot, unable to extend full flaps, touching down fast and hard on the grass runway. The aircraft bounces, settles, and he stands on the brakes, feeling the right tire blow out as the fighter slews sideways. He corrects with rudder, manages to keep it straight, and finally rolls to a stop at the end of the runway. Ground crew trucks race toward him. Stiegler sits in the cockpit for a moment, hands still on the controls, breathing hard. His flight suit is soaked with sweat despite the cold. 3 missions in 5 days. How much longer can they maintain this tempo? How much longer before his luck runs out? The answer, he suspects, is not long. October 20th, 1943. 1900 hours. Officers' Club, Schiphol. 2 days of bad weather have grounded both sides, giving the Luftwaffe a respite. Stiegler sits at a corner table in the Officers' Club, a glass of schnapps in front of him that he's barely touched. The club is subdued tonight. Half the usual crowd is missing. Pilots who didn't return from the recent missions. Empty chairs at tables. Conversations that happen in hushed tones rather than the raucous laughter that used to fill this room. Weber joins him, carrying 2 fresh glasses. The young pilot looks older now, aged by 5 days of intense combat. Herr Oberleutnant, may I sit? Of course. Stiegler gestures to the empty chair. Weber sits, pushes one of the glasses toward Stiegler. They drink in silence for a moment. I've been doing some thinking, Weber says finally, about the Americans, about how many bombers they keep sending. Dangerous habit, thinking, Stiegler replies, but there's no humor in his voice. At Schweinfurt, we shot down 60. 2 days later, they came back with over 200. We shot down 41 of those. 3 days later, another 150. We keep hitting them hard, achieving good kill ratios, and yet they keep coming back with more aircraft than before. Weber takes a drink, his hand steady despite the implication of what he's saying. There's only one explanation that makes sense. Stiegler waits, wanting to hear if Weber has reached the same conclusion he has. They're not just replacing their losses, Weber continues. They're expanding their bomber force while simultaneously replacing losses. Which means their production rate is... He trails off, unable to complete the thought. Unprecedented, Stiegler finishes, beyond anything we've imagined. I've been reviewing the intelligence reports, the ones we all dismissed as propaganda or exaggeration. America has over 3,000 heavy bombers now, with more entering service every week. They're building B-17s at a rate of over 30 per day. Not per month, per day. That's over 900 bombers per month from Boeing alone. And there are other manufacturers. Consolidated building B-24 Liberators at similar rates. Douglas, Lockheed, others. Weber's face has gone pale. Per day? That's, Herr Oberleutnant, that's impossible. No nation can they? Stiegler interrupts. We keep saying it's impossible, yet here they are. 3 major raids in 5 days. 2 days after losing 60 bombers at Schweinfurt, they launched a 250-plane raid. That doesn't happen if you're struggling to replace losses. That happens when you have bombers to spare. A longer silence. Other pilots at nearby tables are engaged in their own conversations, oblivious to the existential dread being discussed in the corner. Or perhaps they're having similar conversations. Perhaps everyone in this room has begun to understand what they're facing. We can't win this, Weber says quietly. It's not a question. It's a realization. Spoken aloud for the first time, Stiegler should reprimand him. Defeatist talk is dangerous. Can get you court-martialed if the wrong person overhears. But he doesn't. Because Weber is right. And they both know it. Not in the air. Stiegler says carefully. Not in a war of attrition. We're better trained, more experienced, flying superior aircraft in many respects. But none of that matters if the enemy can lose 3 aircraft for every one of ours and still expand their force. Mathematics doesn't care about courage or skill. It just is. Then what do we do? Weber's voice carries a note of desperation that Stigler recognizes. It's the sound of a man whose certainties are crumbling, who's beginning to understand that the sacrifices he's making might be futile. Stigler considers the question. What do they do? Surrender is unthinkable. Their families are in Germany under a regime that deals harshly with defeatism. Desertion? Where would they go? To fly for the Russians would be jumping from the frying pan into the fire. Simply stopping, refusing to fight, that's a bullet in the head from the SS. We do our duty, Stigler says finally. We fly, we fight. We shoot down as many of them as we can. We buy time hoping that something changes. Maybe the Americans will reach their breaking point, decide the cost is too high. Maybe some political settlement will be reached. Maybe. He stops because he doesn't believe any of it. And lying to Weber serves no purpose. Maybe the war ends before we're all dead. Weber finishes. Yes. Stigler raises his glass. To survival. Weber clinks his glass against Stigler's. To survival. They drink. And in the silence that follows, both men are thinking the same thought. How many more missions before our luck runs out? October 22nd, 1943, 7:30 hours. Luftwaffe base Schiphol, Netherlands. The weather has cleared. The morning briefing is short and grim. American bombers are inbound, another large raid, estimated strength over 200 aircraft. Targets unknown, but the Americans have been systematically hitting German industrial capacity. Factories, refineries, transportation hubs. Everything that keeps Germany's war machine functioning. Stigler's Messerschmitt has been repaired. The battle damage from 2 days ago patched over. The right wing shows the marks where new aluminum panels were riveted in place, but Müller assures him the aircraft is airworthy. Stigler trusts his crew chief's judgment more than he trusts most officers. The scramble order comes at 800 hours. Stigler and 11 other fighters from the Sargaize, G-26, take off into a clear morning sky, climbing toward their assigned patrol altitude of 28,000 feet. The radio is already busy with reports from other units making contact with the American formations. At 0845, Stigler sees them. His 4th encounter with American bombers in 8 days, and the sight still makes his breath catch. Over 200 B-17s in multiple combat boxes, their contrails creating a lattice of white lines across the blue sky. But this time something is different. Achtung! Fighter escort at 11 o'clock high. The warning comes from Hauptmann Rolf Pingel, leading another staffel off to Stigler's left. Stigler cranes his neck and sees them. P-47 Thunderbolts, dozens of them weaving above the bomber formation. His stomach sinks. The Thunderbolts shouldn't be here, not this far into German airspace. They must be using external drop tanks, extending their range. Which means the window during which German fighters could attack the bombers without interference is shrinking. The engagement that follows is a confused melee. German fighters trying to reach the bombers, American P-47s diving to intercept. The bombers maintaining formation and heading for their target. Stigler finds himself in a turning fight with a Thunderbolt, both aircraft pulling hard, bleeding energy. Each pilot trying to gain position. The P-47 is heavy but fast, and its 850 caliber machine guns make it a dangerous opponent. Stigler breaks off the engagement when his fuel state becomes critical. He hasn't fired a shot at the bombers, spent the entire mission dueling with escorts. Around him, other German fighters are similarly disengaging, low on fuel and ammunition. The bomber formation continues eastward, largely unmolested. On the flight back to Schiphol, Stigler does mental calculations. If the Americans can now provide fighter escort deeper into Germany, the Luftwaffe's defensive task becomes exponentially harder. Not only do they have to contend with the bombers' defensive fire, but now they have to fight through escort fighters to even reach the bombers. And escort fighters are designed for one purpose: killing other fighters. The mathematics of attrition, already unfavorable, just became catastrophic. October 28, 1943, 1400 hours. Luftwaffe base Schiphol, Netherlands. 6 days have passed. In those 6 days, the Americans have launched 3 more major raids. Each time, Stigler and his dwindling staffel have scrambled to intercept. Each time, they've fought desperately against overwhelming numbers. And each time, the bomber formations have continued to their targets, dropped their bombs and fought their way back to England. The tally on Miller's chalkboard tells the story. October 22nd. 200 B-17s attack Bremen. Luftwaffe claims 38 destroyed. German fighter losses 29. October 24th. 180 B-17s attack Kassel. Luftwaffe claims 22 destroyed. German fighter losses 25. October 26th. 220 B-17s attack Hanover. Luftwaffe claims 31 destroyed. German fighter losses 31. The kill ratios are approaching parity. For every bomber the Luftwaffe shoots down, they're losing nearly one fighter. And while the Americans continue to come back with larger and larger formations, their bomber force growing despite the losses, the Luftwaffe's fighter strength is shrinking. JG-26 began October with 16 operational aircraft and 22 pilots. Today, October 28th, they have 9 operational aircraft and 13 pilots. 5 pilots dead. 4 wounded badly enough to be removed from flight status. 7 aircraft destroyed. 3 damaged beyond economical repair. And according to the morning intelligence brief, another American raid is forming up over England. Stigler sits in his cockpit, waiting for the scramble order, and does the mathematics one more time. The conclusions are inescapable. America is producing heavy bombers at a rate exceeding 30 per day. That's over 900 per month. Even assuming combat losses of 20%, which is higher than their actual loss rate, they're still adding over 700 bombers per month to their operational force. Germany is producing fighters at a rate of approximately 600 per month. Total all types for all fronts. The Luftwaffe must defend against American bombers in the west, British bombers at night, and still maintain forces in the east against the Soviets, in the Mediterranean against the Allies there, and reserve forces for homeland defense. The fighter production rate is insufficient. The pilot training pipeline is insufficient. The fuel stocks are insufficient. Everything is insufficient when measured against the scale of resources the Americans can bring to bear. At Schweinfurt, the Luftwaffe celebrated shooting down 60 bombers as a great victory. It was presented as proof that American daylight bombing was unsustainable. But here, 2 weeks later, the Americans are flying more sorties than ever, with larger formations, and their losses as a percentage of force deployed are actually decreasing as they refine their tactics and improve their defensive formations. The celebration at Schweinfurt was premature. It was based on the assumption that the Americans operated under the same resource constraints as Germany, that losing 60 bombers would cripple their capabilities for weeks or months. But the Americans don't operate under those constraints. They lose 60 bombers and replace them in 2 days. They lose 91 bombers across multiple raids in a week and come back the next week with an even larger force. It's not a battle Germany can win through attrition. The numbers don't work. The scramble order comes over the radio. Stigler starts his engine, waves away the wheel chocks, and taxis toward the runway. Weber's Messerschmitt falls in behind his 9 aircraft, taking off to face over 200 bombers and their escorts. The mathematics of it would be laughable if it weren't so deadly serious. As Stigler advances his throttle and begins his takeoff roll, he thinks about something his instructor told him years ago during training. The purpose of a fighter pilot is not to die for his country. It's to make the other poor bastard die for his country. But what happens when the other country has so many poor bastards that you're dying and they're dying both serve their strategic objectives? The Messerschmitt's wheels leave the ground. Stigler retracts his landing gear and begins his climb toward the bomber stream, toward the enemy who keeps coming back no matter how many you shoot down, who replaces losses overnight, who flies in formations so large they darken the sky, toward the inexorable arithmetic of American industrial might. November 3, 1943, 0900 hours. 8th Air Force Headquarters, High Wycombe, England. Major General Anderson reviews the casualty reports from October with a grim sense of satisfaction. It's a contradictory emotion. Satisfaction at strategic success, grimness at the human cost. The two feelings coexist uneasily in his mind. October 1943. The 8th Air Force flew 2,359 heavy bomber sorties and lost 186 bombers to all causes. That's a loss rate of 7.9%, unacceptably high by any peacetime standard, but sustainable in wartime, especially given the strategic results achieved. German industry has been hit hard. ball bearings, aircraft factories, submarine yards, synthetic oil plants. Bomb damage assessment photos show extensive destruction across multiple target complexes. More importantly, the Luftwaffe's defensive efforts are showing signs of strain. Intelligence reports indicate German fighter units are below authorized strength. Pilot quality is declining as experienced veterans are killed or captured, and their production cannot keep pace with losses. The mathematics of industrial attrition are playing out exactly as planned. Not pleasantly, not without cost, but exactly as planned. Sir. Colonel LeMay enters Anderson's office carrying a thick folder. The November target list pending weather. Also, the new drop tank configurations for the P-47s have been tested. We're looking at adding approximately 50 miles to their escort range. Should allow us to provide fighter cover another 30 to 40 miles into German territory. Good. Anderson takes the folder, flips it open. The target list includes Wilhelmshaven, Gelsenkirchen, Bremen, and a dozen other industrial centers. What's the replacement rate looking like? Aircraft. We received 243 new B-17s in October, along with 98 B-24s. That's well above our loss rate. We're actually expanding the force despite combat attrition. Crews. Training Command graduated 312 heavy bomber crews in October, again above our loss rate. We're currently at full authorized strength with a reserve pool building. Anderson nods slowly. These are the numbers that matter. Not individual missions, not tactical successes or failures, but the aggregate mathematics of production and replacement. As long as America can produce aircraft and train crews faster than the Germans can destroy them, the strategic bombing campaign will continue. The Luftwaffe can win every battle and still lose the war. There's increasing chatter in the press about the loss rates. LeMay continues. Congress is asking questions. Families of lost airmen are writing letters. There's political pressure to show results or reconsider the daylight bombing strategy. The results are in the reconnaissance photos. Anderson replies. Every major raid degrades German industrial capacity. Every raid forces the Luftwaffe to expend resources defending. Every raid bleeds their fighter force. We're winning this campaign, Curtis. It just doesn't feel like winning because we're counting our losses and not their losses. LeMay is silent for a moment, then. The men need to believe they're making a difference, sir. They need to believe that their sacrifices matter. They are. They do. Anderson closes the folder. In December, we're going to start receiving the P-51 Mustang in operational numbers. Drop tank range that'll let it escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back. Once we have long-range escort for the entire mission profile, the Luftwaffe's defensive task becomes impossible. They'll have to engage our fighters while trying to attack the bombers, and they'll lose that battle because our fighters are good and we have more of them. And until then, we keep flying. We keep bombing. We keep bleeding the Luftwaffe. The mathematics favor us even when individual missions don't. Anderson meets LeMay's eyes. I know it's hard. I know we're asking men to fly into hell with incomplete protection. But this is how we win. Through sustained pressure, through overwhelming resource advantage, through refusing to quit even when the costs are high. The Germans are hoping we'll break, that we'll decide the cost is too high and abandon daylight bombing. We won't, we can't. Because if we quit, everything those men died for becomes meaningless. November 5th, 1943, 15:45 hours, 24,000 feet above Münster, Germany. Stiegler watches the bomber formation fade into the distance, heading back toward England. His ammunition is exhausted, his fuel is low, and he didn't shoot down a single B-17. He damaged one, saw his cannon shells tear into its number 4 engine, saw smoke trail from the nacelle, but the fortress maintained formation. Kept flying, will probably make it home for repairs. Around him, the sky is empty of German fighters. They've all expended their ammunition, broken off the engagement, headed back to their bases to rearm and refuel. Maybe there'll be time for another sortie if the Americans launch a second wave. Maybe not. The radio crackles with scattered reports. Kill claims, damage assessments, calls for rescue for pilots who've bailed out or made forced landings. Stiegler tunes most of it out, focusing on flying his aircraft home, conserving fuel, maintaining formation with Weber who's still on his wing. In the distance, he can see Bremen burning. The Americans hit the port facilities today, and from this altitude he can see columns of smoke rising from the waterfront. Another successful raid for the Americans. Another day when the Luftwaffe fought hard, shot down a dozen or so bombers, and still couldn't prevent the enemy from reaching their target and dropping their bombs. November 5, 1943. Stigler's 64th combat mission. He's been flying almost continuously since October 14th, 22 missions in 3 weeks, the longest operational tempo of his career. And still the Americans keep coming. He stopped counting the bomber formations, stopped trying to estimate their strength. The numbers have become meaningless. There are always more bombers. Always. Shoot down a dozen today and tomorrow there'll be 24 more. It's like fighting the tide. You can kill individual waves, but the ocean is infinite. Schiphol appears ahead, the runway visible through scattered clouds. Stigler lowers his landing gear, adjusts his trim, lines up for landing. The Messerschmitt touches down smoothly, and he taxis toward the dispersal area where Müller and his ground crew are waiting. The crew chief's face is drawn as Stigler climbs from the cockpit. Herr Oberleutnant, we've received word. Oberst Galland is visiting the base tomorrow. He's conducting an inspection tour of fighter units in the West, assessing combat readiness and morale. Adolf Galland, General of Fighters, one of the Luftwaffe's most decorated pilots, now responsible for the entire fighter force. His visit means something significant is happening at the command level. Do you know what it's about? Stigler asks, accepting the cigarette Müller offers. Rumors only. But word is that Göring has been demanding explanations for why the Luftwaffe hasn't stopped the American bombing campaign. Apparently he's been telling Hitler that our fighters are cowards, that we're not attacking aggressively enough. Müller's voice carries barely suppressed anger. He doesn't understand what we're facing out there. None of them do, sitting in their headquarters looking at maps and reports. Stigler exhales smoke, watching it drift away on the wind. Cowards. The word would be laughable if it weren't so insulting. He's flown 64 combat missions. He's been shot up 3 times, watched friends die, spent 3 weeks flying multiple sorties per day against impossible odds, and Göring, who hasn't flown combat since the early days of the war, calls his pilots cowards. What do you think Galland will tell us? Weber asks, joining them. The young pilot looks exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed from fatigue and strain. The truth if he's honest, Stigler replies, or comforting lies if he's not. But it doesn't matter what he tells us. We'll still fly tomorrow and the day after and the day after that, because that's what we do. November 6, 1943, 1100 hours. Officers Club, Schiphol. General Adolf Galland stands before the assembled pilots of the Seker JG-26, and the silence in the room is absolute. Galland's uniform is impeccable, his knight's cross with oak leaves and swords prominent at his throat. He looks every inch the fighter ace, the legendary leader, but his eyes, Stigler notices, carry a weariness that no amount of polish can hide. Gentlemen, Galland begins, his voice carrying easily in the quiet room. I'm here to listen more than to speak. I've spent the past week visiting fighter units across the Western Front, talking to pilots, understanding the challenges you're facing. Before I share my observations, I want to hear from you. Speak freely. What are the primary difficulties you're encountering in combat against the American bombers? A moment of hesitation, pilots glancing at each other, uncertain whether this invitation for candor is genuine or a trap. Finally, Hauptmann Rolf Pingel stands. Herr General, the Americans are coming in formations larger than anything we've seen before. 200, sometimes 300 bombers in a single raid. Our units are undermanned. We're supposed to have 16 aircraft per staffel, but most of us are operating with 10 or 12 at best. We're outnumbered 5-1, sometimes 10-1. Galland nods, making notes. Continue. The bomber formations are becoming more disciplined, another pilot adds. Their combat boxes provide mutual defensive fire that makes close attacks extremely costly. And now they're beginning to penetrate deeper with fighter escorts. P-47s with drop tanks. Soon they'll be able to escort the bombers all the way to the targets. What about ammunition? Galland asks. Are you carrying sufficient cannon ammunition? Sir, we carry enough for perhaps 3 or 4 attack passes. Stigler speaks up, surprising himself. But Galland asked for honesty, and the issues are too critical to remain silent. Against a formation of 200 bombers, that means we might damage a dozen aircraft if we're fortunate. Not enough to significantly impact the raid, and if we have to fight through escort fighters first, we expend ammunition on them before ever reaching the bombers. Galland turns his attention to Stigler. Oberleutnant? Stiegler, Herr General. Franz Stiegler. You've been flying against these raids since Schweinfurt, yes? Yes, Herr General. 22 missions in 3 weeks. And what is your professional assessment of the American bomber force? The question hangs in the air. Stiegler knows what Galland is really asking. Can we win? Can the Luftwaffe stop the American daylight bombing campaign? It's the question every pilot in this room has been asking themselves but hasn't dared voice aloud. Stiegler chooses his words carefully. Herr General, at Schweinfurt we shot down 60 bombers and celebrated a great victory. 2 days later, the Americans returned with a larger force than before. In the 3 weeks since Schweinfurt, we've destroyed over 150 American bombers. Yet their raid sizes continue to increase. They're not just replacing losses, they're expanding their force despite our efforts. You're suggesting our attrition strategy isn't working. I'm suggesting, Herr General, that the Americans are operating under different resource constraints than we are. Their industrial production allows them to absorb losses that would cripple any European air force. Unless we can achieve kill ratios significantly exceeding what we're currently managing, perhaps 5 or 6 to 1, we cannot prevent them from continuing their campaign. The room is deadly silent now. Stiegler has spoken aloud what everyone knows but few dare say. They're losing, not through lack of courage or skill, but through simple arithmetic. Galland's expression is unreadable. And can we achieve such kill ratios? Not sustainably, Herr General. Not without fundamental changes to our tactics, aircraft, or force structure. We're bleeding experienced pilots. Replacement pilots arrive with minimal training and die quickly, and every day the Americans become more proficient. Their formations tighter, their tactics more refined. Galland closes his notebook. For a long moment he simply stands there, and Stiegler wonders if he's overstepped, if he's about to be arrested for defeatism. But then the general speaks, and his voice carries a tone Stiegler wasn't expecting. Resignation mixed with grim determination. Gentlemen, I will be direct with you because you deserve honesty. Everything Oberleutnant Stiegler has said is correct. The Americans possess industrial capacity beyond anything we anticipated. Their production rates for heavy bombers exceed all our estimates. Intelligence now suggests they're building over 30 B-17s per day. Per day. That's 900 per month from one manufacturer alone. Our fighter production is approximately 600 aircraft per month total, spread across all types and all fronts. We cannot match their production. We cannot sustain current attrition rates, and within 6 months they'll have long-range fighters capable of escorting bombers to any target in Germany. Reichsmarschall Göring does not accept these assessments. He believes, Galland pauses, choosing his words carefully, he believes the Luftwaffe's defensive failures stem from lack of aggression rather than systemic disadvantages. He has ordered me to improve pilot morale and offensive spirit. As if spirit can overcome mathematics, the admission is stunning. A general of the Luftwaffe, speaking openly about the disconnect between high command and operational reality. Stiegler exchanges glances with Weber. This is either the most honest briefing they've ever received or the prelude to something terrible. So what do we do, Herr General? Pingel asks. We continue to fight, Galland replies, because that is our duty, and because every bomber we shoot down is one less bomber hitting our cities and factories. But I will not lie to you. This is a battle we're losing. The only questions are how long we can delay the inevitable, and how many of our cities we can spare from destruction before the end comes. I'm working on new tactics, new aircraft designs, jet fighters that might shift the balance, but these developments will take time. Until then, you'll continue to face overwhelming odds. All I can promise is that your sacrifices are recognized, that your courage is noted, and that when this war ends, history will remember that you fought against impossible odds with honor and skill. The speech ends. Pilots sit in stunned silence, processing the implications. A general has essentially told them the war is lost, or at least this portion of it. He's acknowledged that their daily sacrifices, while brave, may be strategically futile. It's the kind of honesty that could shatter morale, or liberate it from false hope. Stiegler isn't sure which effect it has on him. But as the briefing breaks up and pilots file out of the officers' club, he feels a strange sense of clarity. The illusions are gone. The pretense that one more great defensive battle might turn the tide, that the Americans might break, that Germany's technological superiority might prevail, all of it stripped away by Galland's stark honesty. They're fighting to delay the inevitable. To buy time for you something? A negotiated peace? New wonder weapons? A miracle? Stigler doesn't know, but at least now they're fighting with eyes open, without the burden of false expectations. November 13th, 1943, 13:15 hours, 26,000 feet above Bremen, Germany. The bomber formation today numbers over 300 B-17s. Stigler has stopped being surprised by the numbers. 300 seems almost routine now. Just 2 weeks after formations of 200 seemed impossibly large. He makes his attack pass, fires his cannon and machine guns in a concentrated burst at a B-17 flying in the middle of the formation, sees his shells impact around the cockpit area, then dives away as return fire fills the space he just occupied. His wingman Weber stays with him through the maneuver. The kid has gotten good, survived long enough to develop the instincts that separate veterans from corpses. Stigler pulls out of his dive and looks back at the bomber formation. The B-17 he hit is trailing smoke from one engine, but it's still flying, still in formation. Not enough damage, never enough damage. Around the bomber stream he counts over 100 German fighters, Messerschmitts, Focke-Wulfs, even a few twin-engine Me-110s making head-on passes with their heavy cannon. It's the largest defensive effort Stigler has seen in weeks. Every available fighter within range has been scrambled. And still the bomber formation continues its inexorable advance toward Bremen. More bombers at 12 o'clock level. The warning over the radio makes Stigler's stomach sink. He looks ahead of the main formation and sees them. Another 100 B-17s, a second wave attacking different targets. And behind them he can see contrails that suggest a third wave, 400 bombers. Maybe more. In a single day, the mathematics are brutal. Even if the Luftwaffe achieves a miraculous kill ratio and destroys 10% of the attacking force, 40 bombers, the Americans will replace those losses in 30 hours of production. And the Luftwaffe will have expended irreplaceable pilots and aircraft achieving that victory. Stigler climbs back toward the bomber stream for another attack pass, but his heart isn't in it. Not from cowardice or lack of will, but from understanding. He's not fighting to win anymore. He's fighting to survive, to delay, to make them pay some price for every mile they penetrate into German airspace. But the outcome is no longer in doubt. The Americans couldn't be stopped at Schweinfurt when 60 bombers were destroyed. They couldn't be stopped when 91 bombers fell in a single week. They won't be stopped today when perhaps 30 or 40 bombers go down, because tomorrow they'll be back with more bombers than today. And the day after tomorrow, even more. It's not courage the Americans lack, or skill or determination. It's the ability to run out of aircraft. And that ability, or rather the lack of it, is winning the war. Stigler lines up his next attack, thumb hovering over the firing button, and somewhere in the back of his mind he wonders, how many more missions before my luck runs out? Before I become one of the names read at the evening briefing, one of the empty chairs in the officers' mess, one of the letters sent to a family in Bavaria, informing them that Oberleutnant Franz Stigler died serving the fatherland? 10 more missions? 20? 50? The number doesn't matter, because whether he dies tomorrow or 6 months from now, the outcome will be the same. The Americans will keep coming. The bombers will keep filling the sky, and eventually, inevitably, they'll win. Not through superior tactics or better aircraft or braver men, but through the simple, inexorable arithmetic of industrial production. 1 bomber every 40 minutes, 37 per day, over 1,000 per month. Numbers that Germany, no matter how skilled its pilots or advanced its technology, simply cannot match. The Americans understood something the Germans didn't. Modern war isn't won by heroes or aces or individual brilliance. It's won by assembly lines, by factories that never sleep, by an industrial capacity so vast that losing 60 bombers in a single day is merely an inconvenience, a temporary setback, something that can be made up within 48 hours. Stigler presses the firing button. His cannon fires, shells arc across the sky toward the bombers, and somewhere in that formation of 300 fortresses, his shots might damage one, might, if he's lucky, and tomorrow there will be 300 more.